Straight out of classroom taught in NYC, pre-K through college, part of his or better, her story. Cover to cover, girl, you just been school while sipping tea up in the teacher's lounge and dropping a jewel. Check out my ed while tattletaling on me. Teachable or teacher's bull moments will set your mind free. Unplug a teacher while you give her some love. Sit back, relax, and watch an educated teacher unplugged. Giving you all the information you need. Inside track won't set you back to show you how to succeed. A show unplugging everything. Education highlights the very best of early childhood to graduation. Teacher Unplugged is ready to get real with a show dedicated to all the heroes in this field. Teacher Unplugged, Teacher Unplugged, Teacher Unplugged, no doubt about it. Teacher Unplugged, Teacher Unplugged, Teacher Unplugged. Let's talk about it. Hey, Teacher Unpluggers. Welcome to another episode of A Teacher Unplugged. As usual, I'm your host, Miss Montgomery, first grade extraordinaire. And, again, welcome to Teachers Unplugged. Now, today we're talking education out of the classroom and into the community. Yes, we are. Now, we're joined by candidate Felix Omozusi, and he's running for New York State Assembly, 82nd District. Now, he's here to discuss the issues, of course, that matter most to our viewers: education, housing, public safety, which is a number one for us, economic, opportunity, and the future of our neighborhoods. So let's unplug this, big talking points, and let's plug right into the conversation. Hi, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh, absolutely. I've been trying to get you for quite a while, and I'm so happy to have you, before the voting actually, well, it's early voting, and it actually ends the 23rd, I believe, of this month. Of June. Is that correct?
Election day is the 23rd. Early voting starts the 13th to the 21st.
Okay, so you all... Yes, you all get out there and vote, okay? Get out there and vote. So tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for State Assembly 82nd District.
Well, thank you so much once again for having me on your show. My name is Felix Omozusi. I was born in Brooklyn to African parents of Nigerian, Ghanaian, and Togolese descent. Spent a lot of my childhood, between the Bronx and West Africa. Came back to Queens and then moved back to the Bronx. So basically, I'm from New York, right? I consider myself a New African, as I like to call it. And my leadership journey actually began in the New York State Assembly. It was around the time Barack Obama got in office. I was inspired, seeing this Black man, this African man who, got to the highest office and became the president of the United States. It was inspiring. It was subconsciously creating this need to get involved in the community. So I was a freshman in college in Stony Brook University, and I saw this assembly internship poster that was in my RA's dorm, and I was just trying to find myself and figure what I wanted to do. I initially wanted to be a lawyer, but I still wasn't sure if that was the path I wanted. So I just applied for this program. It was for seniors and for graduate students. And I was a freshman. I guess I've always been quite assertive. I was very assertive with calling them every day, sending my resume, my credentials, and eventually I got accepted to the program. I had to move to Albany. I was there for the whole semester. I was there for the whole legislative session. And, when I got there, I worked with one of the assembly members there. We used to have mock sessions where we'd be in the chambers, sitting in the seats, proposing legislation. It was so fascinating. I watched these lawmakers create these policies that affected people's daily lives. And I wondered if people were aware of the power that these elected officials had, if people knew that every single day there was a legislation being proposed, some that were being amended, and I became fascinated with the political process. I ended up changing my major to political science, and I graduated with a bachelor's from Stony Brook University. I also minored in theater arts. I am. I'm an artist. I'm an artist, and I guess politics is how I.
Well, you need to be theatrical, when it comes to politics.
I try to be as real as possible, but theater definitely gives you the, being able to speak, being able to be comfortable in a public setting. But when I went to film school, I went to New York Film Academy with the thought of possibly doing politics later in life. I pursued my acting career, had a Started from humble beginnings, did every cliche struggling artist job, like working as a waiter, as a security guard.
Okay.
Eventually, did a few like short films and web series. Eventually booked my first movie, which was out in theaters at the time.
Wow.
I was doing my thing. I was well on my way, making a name for myself. And
Well, I guess
then,
that's what absolutely separates you from the other candidates, which was going to be my follow-up question. What separates you from the other
yes,
candidates that's seeking this seat? And you mentioned part of it, but is there anything else that separates you from, your the
there
candidates that are
there are
seeking this seat?
definitely a few, and I'll definitely touch on that. The I was well on my way, and then Donald Trump got in office. And in a very interesting way, I was inspired. It was a call to action. It was like, hey, I need to use my degree to do something. I need to get involved in the community. And I reached out my local elected offices, and I ended up volunteering in the New York State Senate in Queens for Senator Sanders at the time. I did that for about 2 months, eventually got hired to become the constituent liaison. And that is where my leadership journey became hands on. I was responsible for the district. I covered several initiatives in the community, advocated for, constituent services. I was also the clergy coordinator. So I did a clergy breakfast every month with clergy leaders around the state. There was also a school that was in the district that was down for foreclosure that I helped to fight for, along with the community leaders. And we were able to keep the school open. And then I was selected by the community to become the community school director. Then I became a community school director there, started a lot of initiatives. I started a student government while I was there, did several initiatives to improve the attendance. I did youth mentorship programs. I worked in the community center, helping a lot of youth with arts and teaching theater and youth empowerment, and then to speed it up, because it's always awkward talking about your experience.
Sure.
It got to I moved to Co-op City, and
Okay.
then I had to start all over again.
Yes.
People were
Yes.
like, "Hey, who's this guy? Where are you from? What do you?" I said, "I've been doing this since I was 18," and it was quite humbling. And within a few years, I got involved again. I became the vice president of the Democratic Club. I became the civic engagement chair for the NAACP in Co-op City. And over the past 2 years, there was a strong urging, a calling to step up in my leadership. I felt as though there was a lot going on in our country. There's a lot of division. The prices have skyrocketed. People are losing faith in government. And, I think right now, I always say is that, we still have good leaders out here, and they're not always the ones, they're usually in the
Yes.
background fighting their bosses to do the right thing. They're usually overworked and underpaid. But right now, it is so crucial that these good leaders find the courage to step up and stand on the front lines and do the right thing. And I believe I'm
Especially
one
if
of
they're
those leaders.
Yes, especially if they're as qualified as you are. Like I see, I hear your credentials, and I mean, it's vast. Considering that's exactly what is needed. At a time in our country and the state that we're in right now, we
Mhm.
definitely need strong leadership. We
Yeah.
need someone that's not afraid to get out there and get their hands dirty and get out there and say, the hard no's when you need to, and not
Yes.
just go along with
Yes.
the bandwagon. And speaking of, education, of course, and what you've done for the youth, I have to be specific here. And what policies, will you support, to improve public education in the 82nd district?
Okay, first I would say I'm an educator. Once an
Mm.
educator, always an educator. I was a civic education teacher, a
Okay.
community school director. I've worked in community centers. I've done, arts. I do the after school program. I teach theater in Fordham, in New Rochelle. I could humbly say I've had a positive impact on thousands of youths across the world. I'm very passionate about education. I believe it's time for us to reimagine our education system. We have to be a bit more bold and intentional. A couple of things I want to bring to our education system. First of all, I believe state funding for public schools has to be consistent. They have to be non-negotiable. It's not something that people are going to have to fight for. Our schools need a lot of support, especially schools within certain areas in our city. I believe, especially those after-school programs that they always
Yes.
overlook.
After-school programs play an important role in helping students succeed, both inside and outside the classroom. These programs provide a safe and supportive environment where young people can continue learning, explore their interests, and build valuable life skills. Many students use after-school programs for homework help, tutoring, sports, arts, and leadership activities. These opportunities help improve academic performance, boost confidence, and encourage teamwork and responsibility. After-school programs also support working families by providing a structured place for children during the hours after school, when parents may still be at work. By keeping students engaged in positive activities, these programs can reduce risky behaviors and strengthen connections within the community. In short, after-school programs help students grow academically, socially, and emotionally, making them an important investment in our future. Thank you.
And I've seen firsthand how effective they are. I'll give you an example. Teaching theater in some of these after school, some of the kids, I'm talking about third, fourth, fifth grade, couldn't read my script. And Shayna, I was up at night thinking about this. It took me a week to calm down because, when you talk about it, it sounds like you're making a speech, but I'm seeing it firsthand. And I was wondering, I'm sure there are several factors to that, but guess what? Towards the ending of my art program, because, the election was coming around and I had to, kind of switch gears a little bit.
Yes.
I asked the students, I said, tell me one word of something you've learned throughout this process. Mm-hmm. And I said I was going to go first. And I said that I learned patience because y'all get on my nerves. They do. They jump around. They can't sit still for 1 second, but I love them though. And one of them said, I learned how to read through theater.
Well, building fluency is a huge part of reading and comprehension and scripts and poems and, the arts.
Engaging means fun classes, fun activities. So I saw firsthand how effective that is. So as your assembly member, I'm going to fund those after school programs, especially the ones for students past 12 years old, because a lot of those programs always seem like, they need that a lot. I've also done the anti-gun violence programs around the schools in Queens and Harlem. I've taught these students about the dangers of gun violence. Again, I've seen the effects of that. Some of them, I'm talking about kids who are in gangs who will reach out to me and say, thank you for your lesson. Thank you for that. I needed that. Sometimes they need that voice who could tell them that, to stay on this path, to be consistent with them, to check up on them. Again, it has to be consistent. So I want to fund those programs. I believe it's also time to bring back civic education. Again, I was a civic education teacher.
I speak on that on several shows
on civics
all the time.
And I'll humbly say this again. I'm Mr. Civics now, right? And I'll tell you why. I was a civic education teacher. I'm the civic engagement chair for the NAACP. I did an event called Rock to Vote where we were able to register over 100 people to vote. I followed that with civic engagement workshops, teaching about the legislature, the judiciary, the Constitution. I want people to be civically engaged, but you have to meet them where they are. So I took that to the schools. I took that around. I take that, if anybody's interested, I want to bring that. So from my work as a civic education teacher and being the civic engagement chair, I've put up a whole slide of almost 250 pages. I could literally put out a curriculum because when I was a teacher, I put the curriculum together.
I think you should. You really should, because what's missing is a civics education, a strong curriculum, that students can follow and students can get involved and understand how our government works. They don't know the three branches of government. So that's definitely a great way to, merge the two, government, politics, and education. It starts with civic education. I always say that. Yes. And now, what do you think? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I was just going to say civics wasn't just about politics and government. It was also about morals and principles. They have to understand those morals and principles and also care about the community coming up. They have to care about that. And something else, again, I want to bring back with the education, and I hope nobody does this. So hopefully if I get in office by January, I could get it done before, you have an idea and it gets done real quick. Cursive writing. I write with my cursive. Again, I'm talking from my experience. In the schools, a lot of the students I see barely use pens or paper, right? We have technology, we have AI. They don't have penmanship, they can't sign. And now let me tell you, I still write with my cursive handwriting. Now, there's a correlation between reading and writing. They go together. When you read, you learn by writing. So if you're writing cursive and you have good penmanship, you enjoy writing, you enjoy the art and the science of writing, you're more likely to read and learn. And there's a literacy component that we're missing, and the further we go in technology is completely getting lost. So if we combine intentional reading literacy programs, these after-school programs that are constantly being engaging and fun, but also instilling that culture of reading, and we have cursive writing where they're enjoying writing, they're writing essays, and they learn civic education. These are components to really build the next generation of leaders. They're going to be more literate and not be uncomfortable with certain professions that involve speaking, whether it's as a lawyer or as a politician or even as an artist, right? A lot of students who find the discomfort at that age and never get past that. They completely step away from that. They become adults that spell woman with an E, or my woman with an E, or there, and there. It's such a
Yes.
delicate thing
Yes.
at a certain age that we have to target. So as your assembly member, I'm going to fund those programs, and I'm going to go to the schools all around the district. And I want to hear from every single student. I want to hear them reading. I want to hear how they're learning and see how I can be of support. And that's what I want to do when it comes to education. Thank you.
So what do you believe is the biggest issue facing residents in the 82nd district today?
Well, I would say the biggest across the board will certainly be the high cost of living. And I know people use the word affordability like it's something, but it really goes well-rounded for the whole New York State in general.
How would you address that, the affordability situation?
In a couple of ways. Well, we have to meet people where they are. We have to understand that New York is a unique place, and is a metropolitan of the world. So I understand why things are the way they are, but we also have to remember we went through a pandemic. Businesses have shut down. Everything has gone up but our wages, right? The first thing we have to do, I think it's time for us to consider increasing the minimum wage of the state to at least $30. When I was an intern in the assembly, they changed the minimum wage from $6.75 to $7.15. That was almost 20 years ago, and it was controversial. It is still at 16 or something right now, right?
It went to 15. It went to 15, and then it went up.
That's not what you think it is anymore, right? 100,000 is not what it used to be, right? So we have to increase that. That's number one. Number two, we have to keep the housing affordable, right? Places like Co-op City that has, is one of the last few affordable homes that we have in New York. Honestly, we have to protect that. We have to keep the maintenance fees affordable, whether it's negotiating with these corporations or funding in areas that they need help. I think it's also time to reduce our property tax. Again, there's nothing too big or too small that we cannot do, right? They talked about the deficit and the possibility of increasing that. Now that the deficit has been reduced, allegedly, hopefully, then we could possibly reduce the home property tax by 1 or 2%. 1 or 2% could be $500 for an individual. That cuts costs in a heavy way, so people have more time to spend with their family, more time to live. It's not just about working 2, 3, 4 jobs. Let's talk about our seniors. The Social Security benefits they're getting is not feasible for this economy. A lot of our retirees are working 2 to 3 jobs. How do you work your whole life and you're still working? You could work if you want to. You could spend time investing in your passions or your businesses and enjoying your later years. So I think it's time for us to increase that as well. So it matches up to where we are, because our economy has gone in a different direction and nothing has caught up to it. So we have to be bold enough to make those changes and stop using excuses of where we're going to find the funds. New York State and New York City is a well-funded oil machine. There are several industries that produce wealth, right? I think it's also time for our seniors to stop paying taxes as well. Again, I'm just throwing it out there, and I'm going to get it done, because I think after a few years, if you've retired at 60 or whatever age, and you've spent all those years working, laboring, investing in our community, spending your life, whether it's in education or different professions, at that particular point, not only are we giving you back, we have to invest in you and say that for all the labor you've put in, you get to enjoy the rest of your life at leisure, not labor anymore. You get to really relax and do what you want to do. But if you're still paying taxes from the little benefits you're getting and still have to work 2, 3 jobs, what is the whole point of this, right? So
they think it's state taxes, just because when you retire, you no longer pay state taxes, but you're still paying the bulk of federal taxes, on a fixed income. And not to mention all of the additional taxes that you pay with different services, with food and things like that.
All of that.
And that's what I was going to ask you, trying to improve the quality of life for residents, for people that feel the quality of life has gone down and they can't keep up with it. What do you think you can do to help improve, the quality of life?
I think it's time that we talk about the reality of New York in general, how you could go from one block. There's a block right here that looks one way, another block that looks right. I'll give an example. In the 82nd district, I was in Thriving Housing a few days ago. I spent a lot of time there. right across from this development where you see leaking ceilings and no heat, no hot water, basic necessities that are not provided, are beautiful homes, right? In a whole different reality. How is that possible, right? So, as your assembly member, we have to ensure that we are giving the funding that is needed. Whether it's a developmental thing, I think it's time that we talk about, a lot of these NYCHA residents to become a state issue. Our federal government is not looking out for these places. It's not what it was in the day. You're not on the ground to see what's happened because you could have the funding to make the change, but you're not making the changes. A lot of them are outdated. A lot of the infrastructures are outdated. There's a lot of maintenance that needs to be done, and we have to give people a quality of life that is. We have to equal the playing field, right? I'm talking about heat, hot water, education, healthcare, public safety. These are non-negotiable.
Bare
These are
necessities as a
basic
human being.
as a human being.
Rights.
You get that for a living. It's not something you have to fight for. It's not something you have to fight for or protest. I get
Not
frustrated when I
especially
go to
since
these
we're
meetings.
talking about, cultivating other countries and their way of life,
Right.
and that we're not asking for much in this country, but for some reason it seems like, everyone else in other countries are benefiting from, what we have here. And we have to take care of our own at some point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's about equaling the playing field. It's about
Yes.
making the investments where they're needed. And we have to have people on the ground who are bold enough to make those changes and stop making excuses, right? We have the money, make the investment, give them what they need. I feel their pain and I think about it all the time because I want everybody in the 82nd district, but just in general, to live a life to really follow through with that pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And your quality of life makes a big difference. I live in Co-op City right now. I think Co-op City is one of the most beautiful places in the world. As soon as you walk outside, the trees, the flowers, it's something about that changes your aspect as a human being. Every human being deserves that. That's not something that you have to fight for. So we have to stop the excuses. We have to make the investments where they're needed. We have to make the changes where they're needed, and we have to provide the resources for them to thrive. Whether it's in investing in the small businesses so they can have programs for themselves or work development in whatever aspect that they need so that their lives could be beautiful just like everyone else.
How can we incorporate that with public safety? How can we improve public safety, while building that type of trust in the community?
First, I believe prevention is better than cure. I believe when it comes to public safety, it's not just about being defensive, it's also about being offensive. As long as there are human beings on earth, there's still going to be crime. People are going to do things, and we're going to have to constantly go in this rotation, right? But if you're able to be offensive and prevent it, it could reduce that in a significant way. I'll get more specific. I organize an anti-gun violence program through Black Spectrum Theater, one of the theaters I perform at. I go into the schools, we play a documentary for these students about the realities of gun violence. Again, I've seen firsthand the effects of that, right? And I've seen that, a lot of the times, first of all, over 50% of the crimes are done by the youth. So we know that they get to a certain age where they're on this line between, making these this changing decisions, whether it's something that is based on peer pressure or gang activity or, just, a need, right? When we talk about the places where there are less jobs, there's more crime. Where there's less education, there are more crimes, right? Where there's less youth activities, there's more crime. They go together. So if you're able to get them on the right track, at an early age, you could prevent that, right? Also, by being defensive, right? Working with our 45th precinct, they are one of the biggest precincts in New York, and sometimes they're understaffed. Because we don't have as much crime as other parts of the Bronx. So sometimes
Now, that's been a controversy. I have to interrupt with that, Felix. Whereas it's been said that because we have our own CCPD, that CCPD is in Co-op City and you guys have your own CCPD, that for some reason, the NYPD doesn't really have to get involved as much because we have that. But there's been a lot of outcry, that a lot of public safety has been cut and that NYPD is needed a lot more. But it's, the community is overlooked because the community has had their own public safety. So how can you help get NYPD to understand that they still have to, protect all communities within their district.
Like in general, like
Okay, in general, okay.
the whole assembly district, right?
Yes.
When it comes to Co-op City is a unique place. We have our CCPD, and shout out to them. I think they do a pretty decent job, and I think they need to get a bit more respect for what they do. They're almost treated like some of the police in London that hold the bats without the guns, right? It's almost like, you're not real cops. Yes, they are, right? They are our public safety, but they do have to work with the 45th. So a lot of times when something happens, people will call 911 directly and they still have to report back to CCPD. We have to bridge that gap between them. We have to give them the resources that they need as well. But when it comes to the 45th precinct in general, because it's a big precinct, and because, again, when it comes to the 45th, in comparison to other parts of the Bronx, because our crimes are not as high as the other parts, I've seen a lot of times where those cops are moved to other places, and there are not a lot of people on the ground as they should be. That's a lot of the complaints that I get from them. So they're going to need additional support. Something that has been on the rise now has been grand theft. It's been really high in Throgs Neck and Pelham Bay. I mean, like every other day, there's a car that's being hijacked. They're taking parts. This is a thing that I talk about when it comes to prevention, right? That's an economic thing, right? That's somebody trying to hustle something, trying to sell parts and make money. In Co-op City, we can have some, we're generally peaceful, but every now and then we get like, a gun violence situation. But I think we don't have to wait until it is something drastic to always have that protection. We always have to have people on the ground. And another thing is community policing, right? We have to have them have, and I was having this conversation with a CCPD officer like yesterday. I say, I think you guys are doing a decent job, but keep being connected with the community. I do like that CCPD. A lot of them live in Co-op City. They're on the ground, but, even for me as a Black man, I used to be very uncomfortable around the police, honestly. It wasn't until I did a workshop entitled How the Police Enforces the Law that I had somebody from the 45th Precinct, I think the Detective Marcus there and the 45th Precinct, who shared how the police gets into the police academy, about the training that they do, the psychological evaluation, the crime. I got a full understanding, and it changed my perception. Now when I see the CCPD officers, I greet them. I say hello. We have conversations. Some of them have been supportive. So I think they need to do this with the youth as well. Bring them on board. Let them look at them as the heroes that they're supposed to be. While we do have those situations of injustice, in general, we want to bridge that gap, because a lot of times when it comes to gun violence, we have the basketball tournaments, which are cool, but let's have a real conversation. How about you go on a drive-by with them, see what their day is like, right? Be that big brother to these youth and keep them off the streets. Have that real talk with them and tell them, you know what? It could be anybody you want to be, and put them on the right path. Let them look up to you. It will change their perception, because it changed mine. So as your assembly member, I want to make those investments by supporting the CCPD, the NYP, the 45th precinct specifically, where there is more security cameras that they need, where there is more police officers on the ground, more training, and more, I would say the 45th does a pretty decent job when it comes to the
and
community
outreach. Speaking of that, thank you for that. But speaking of that, what role should the state assembly actually play in addressing crime and public safety concerns?
Like I said, it comes down to how you're able to allocate your resources, right? If it's whatever the need is coming from the 45th, when they let you know that there's a lack of resources when it comes to the security cameras, there's a lack of resources when it comes to the amount of cops that they have on the ground. For example, I wanted to do the drive-by, because I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn, and they said we don't have enough people on the ground to do that. We don't have enough people to do that. So we could give that support by funding, but we could also create events that would bridge that gap between the community and the officers, whether it's the 45th or the CCPD. Create more policies for protections for injustices, as well as also protection for the precinct, because it goes both ways. We have to make sure that we're able to have the justice and make sure that every part is doing their job, right? And something I talk about with them is, it just about punishment or protection? Because if it's about protection, you want to get them on the right track. And I think, again, it goes back to the prevention is better than cure. Having that big brother approach to the community, looking out for them, being their heroes, as opposed to being people who are just creating this tension that is there before something is even being done, right? So it's about bridging that gap and giving them the resources that they need to keep the streets safe. Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of small businesses, now there's been, some backlash about small businesses and them not feeling safe as well. How would you support small businesses?
So a lot of people tend to forget we just had a pandemic like 5 years ago.
Hmm.
Any small business that was able to still be in power or still be running right now, still be functioning, is nothing short of a miracle. Our small businesses are struggling. They need extra support. They need extra funding. The insurance rates that they have are so high, they barely make any profits. In places like Throgsneck, East Tremont, now that we have a casino that has come to the district, the one that the community overwhelmingly said they did not want, the one
Now,
that the assembly member forced them to have, is going to change the whole dynamic of the economy there. There's a monopoly thing that's happening right now. So in order for them to compete, they're going to need additional funding. Another thing is that the 82nd Assembly District is a transportation desert, right? We have the sixth train on Pelham Bay. And then I go to Baychester sometimes. Baychester, that's a 5 you have to walk to call. But a lot of people go from there and they might have to take a bus or take something. So the traffic for businesses is still limited. So we have to expand the transportation system. There's been talks about having the ferry in City Island. That's been a dragged conversation for a very long time. There are literally over 20 empty storefronts in City Island. I'm talking about restaurants that have the signs there. All they need is a key to open it. Why can't we have business owners from this district occupy that place? Why can we not support them with
is
capital
that
funding?
something that you would fight for as an assemblyman? Is that
Absolutely,
something that you
absolutely.
would state and go for? And
Absolutely.
would
And
that
I
be
went on the ground to City Island, and what I heard was that the first thing is that the rent was really high. So
okay?
I think we need to negotiate with some of these landlords to be, to meet us halfway. Because the
Okay.
reality is that not only is the rent high, the rent is high, but the traffic is low. There are not a lot of people there, right? So they're not earning enough money to be able to pay that. So we
Or to
have to
pay
make
out employees. That's
to
another
pay out
reason,
the employees or the rent.
So how
So
would you go about creating jobs while keeping those small businesses in New York where they don't leave New York because they can't afford the rent?
right.
But
So it's
somebody can actually make a living as well. Their employees can actually, earn a living.
absolutely. So, like I said, it would be things like funding these small businesses. If you're able to support a small businesses with a lot of revenue, they could cover a lot of costs and be able to earn profit and hire people from the community. For example, this Bally's Casino, I just have to mention it again because that could have been something else like a community center. That could have been a hospital. That could have been something that could give something back to the community where we hire people that are doing a good service for the people. That would be an opportunity to actually have real employment. There's talks about possibly getting jobs, but we already know a lot of them are not going to come from the community. And if it is, maybe it's going to be maybe construction or something like that, or a custodial position. But that's $1 billion business that we're helping to build. If you're doing something for the community, it will be a service that's going to benefit them, and it will create more revenue. So it's also about creating private-public partnerships, right? Where we're able to fund some of these businesses, and with our additional funding, we could push them further to have it could be a community service agreement where we say, you know what, at least 30% of your hirees have to come from this community. You have to do some sort of community service for us. You have to bring back something into our community. They talked about, the conversation about taxing the rich. I don't, again, when we use it as a phrase, it sounds, very, I don't think is about trying to criminalize people for being rich. There's no crime in being rich, but I
But is
do
that
think
something that you would, support
so.
taxing the rich?
So now let me break this down, right? I
Okay.
think if you're blessed to have wealth, ideally you should give back to your community. I think we should encourage them to do that. That's why the proposal of making it like first of all, starting by paying your fair share of taxes, because that was the first issue that the fair share was not paid, right? So when you do that, that already equals it up. But increasing it by 1% or 2 definitely helps the support. And I think if you want to encourage them, you say, you know what? Do you want to invest in this? Do you want to take 1% or 2 of your taxes to invest in a specific cause in your community? Is there something you're passionate about? We have to make it a way where we are bringing them in and allowing them to be stakeholders in making that change, right? So there are several ways of creating revenue, but I think it has to be a community thing where the decisions are made by the people and they are there are stakeholders in that. And
Well, they're making most of the decisions. That's the problem. The wealth gap is larger than it has ever been. 10 people own more wealth than, you know, a whole country,
Mhm.
basically. So it's what you're saying, but it's also understanding that the wealthy, they need to, and like society doesn't work. You can't, it's unsustainable for us just 10 people or 20 people to have all the world's wealth or all of the country's wealth, and everyone else is just, scrambling for scraps. So what would you do, to make New York more affordable for working families?
Right. Like I said earlier before, we have to start by, you see, this thing when it comes to there's something happening in our state right now is between the haves and the have-nots.
Mhm.
I don't like to criminalize people for what they have. And I think, again, ideally you should, and you should be able to make that support. But a lot of the American dream that we used to have, which was working hard to be able to get your picket fence, we don't have that anymore. You could work hard and still be broke. You could work hard and still be going paycheck to paycheck. And that is the reality for most New Yorkers. That is why I first started by saying we have to increase the minimum wage. First of all, let's start there. So whatever we were getting before, we up it right here because the economy is right here and we're still right here. That way we could start by actually saving because saving is a farce. It's a make-believe thing. It doesn't exist, right? In this economy, you
Now, I
cannot save.
kind of want to stay with the taxing the rich only
Oh,
because
that's my
I know
fault for
what
bringing that
happens with a
up.
lot of politicians. When they get into office, a lot of things are said. A lot of promises are made. And everyone is for taxing the rich, or they should pay their fair share. They should do X, Y, and Z, this. But then when they get in there, suddenly it's a different route that's being taken. You know, we have to make sure, that whoever is put into a position that, they stand for what, they say what they mean and they mean what they
Mhm,
say.
mhm,
And from your standpoint, I understand when you say you're not trying to, say anything negative about anybody who, builds their wealth however they build their wealth. They're entitled to build their wealth. I wholeheartedly agree 100%.
mhm,
But it can't be the middle class is holding up this country. Like the middle class is seriously holding up this country, and this country is being held up by a thread. And only
mhm.
because the middle class, but it seems like there's no more middle class.
Right.
That there's just rich and there's poor. And whoever's in somewhere in the middle of that, they're paying the lion's share of
Mhm,
everything.
mhm,
What do you say to those, that's in that middle class bracket,
mhm,
to make them believe that you're going to be different than other politicians
mhm.
and,
Okay,
if you get elected?
so let me be clear for clarity. I believe the rich need to pay their fair share of taxes. And if the taxes are increased by 1 or 2%, that is absolutely fair. Because that 1 or 2% could be $1 million. That could go into our public schools, that could go into our hospitals, and it still does not take away from the wealth that you have. I just don't want it to be there are people who go a bit extreme where it's like is literally fighting the rich or eat the rich. They take it to different levels, right? I believe we have to bridge the wealth gap, right? That's why I said we have to increase the minimum wage first of all, and we increase the wages, we reduce the cost. We increase the minimum wage, we reduce the cost of we keep the housing affordable, we reduce the cost, the taxes, the property taxes, no taxes for the seniors. We increase revenue by investing in a lot of things. We have agriculture. Also, the state of New York, and I'm by God's grace, I'm going to become the assemblyman. I think New York State needs to carry its weight because New York City has a bigger budget because it's the city, but we have a lot of things we can invest in New York State. We have farmlands. Let's invest in agriculture. Let's create more revenue. Let's get creative. Let's be innovative so we can generate more revenue and support our small businesses and create that funding and start to move move the money around. I talk about in investing our dollar in our district. For example, the 82nd district we have so many things here. Is like people come from all over the Bronx to here. They come to Bay Plaza Mall here in Co-op City. They go to Orchard Beach. They come to Pelham Bay Gardens, Pelham Bay Park over here. So we have people, and for me,
The
it
island.
warms my heart when I see people coming to. I say everybody's coming to the district, but how do we bring that back to the community? How do we put that into our pockets, right? I think it's time for us to, again, I want to be a bit bold here, but it's time for us to talk about, having some sort of percentage into investment into us. For example, when I first moved to Co-op City and I saw the Bay Plaza Mall, in the map it says BID, which is a business improvement district.
Mhm.
And I was like, where are my shares? How is this? There's literally a billion-dollar mall right next to us and is not coming back into the community. And there's no real relationship with us, right? And I think, again, yes, I know it's a private institution, but we have to get a bit more intentional about finding creative ways to just say, you know what, you don't, this is what I mean by you're not obligated to, but I want to encourage you to invest in my community. I want to encourage you
If
to
you
pay
want to be
back
in this community because you're
if you
taking
want. See, I'm saying
from
it
the
nicely.
community. You are
If you
taking
want
from the
to be,
community. So you
you're
have an
taking from
obligation
the
to invest in the
community.
community that you're taking
You
from.
do have an
And speaking of,
obligation.
I'm glad you brought that up because historically, when casinos open in a neighborhood, usually they give some money to schools. Um, as an assemblyman, we know Bally's is opening up. Will you, fight for them to contribute money to education?
So, as you know, Bally's came in to save the day when it came to Preston High School.
Yes, they did. Yes.
The issue or the concern with that is, as much as it's something to help, it still creates this sort of monopoly where they're basically buying the block, where they're basically having percentage or stakes in these different entities in the community. So while it might look like a community agreement or community service, what it really is monopoly, is making investments. And my fear is that there are going to be a lot more decisions that are coming within the district that they're going to be involved in. And because the assemblyman is in support of that and is in their pockets and is working directly for them and not working for the people anymore, he will be the first to propose that. He will be the first to justify it with jobs. And what I'm saying is that, again, it goes back to the haves and the have not. There is something that's really happening across New York State and even within this district where they want to turn this place to Vegas. There's talks about privatization of the NYCHA development, the Throgs Neck housing, because it's right next to the casino. So they want to turn that place into a resort, and they're going to send the people packing and move them to the south where they have no rights, where they're gerrymandering, where they don't have representation. That's not happening on my watch. We have to get more intentional, and I'm not trying to, make this a thing, but I have to call it what it is. And the problem is that, let me speak for the current assemblyman, there is a compromise at this point, right? When you get to the point where you're responding to the corporations and not the people, you're compromised. You're no longer serving the public as a public servant. You no longer have their best interest at heart. Now you're working for them and you've become a cliche, which is a politician who's being ran by the corporations, right? And it has a sprinkle of corruption, and I think we have to call it what it is, and is really creating a real issue that I see coming. And I think when we look down the line in a few years and we think about that moment when the decision was made with the disapproval of the community and how it changed the place, like places like was it Atlantic City. When a casino comes in, it sucks the community dry. It takes away every product and everything that it has there because the people. What happens is that the economy, as it gets worse, people see a casino, they want to sell their cars to go gamble. Addiction is a real thing. When there's nothing, there's nowhere else to go. Even somebody who doesn't do that is going to do that. So who is it really benefiting?
Right.
So
I love a good prediction. Time for pencils and perspectives. So grab your favorite mug and let's dive into today's topic.
Now I'm going to put you in the hot seat a little bit. But I'm going to switch
I,
gears and
I'm
put you in
pretty
the
sure
hot
we were in
seat.
the hot seat.
I hate to cut you off, but the show is not a long show, so I don't want to cut.
Please.
What you're saying, because what you're saying is very valuable. And the voters need to hear it and understand it. But I'm gonna put you in the hot seat a little bit. Do a little rapid fire situation. Now, tell us about a mistake that you've made and what you've learned from it. It's a hard one, huh? Or
It
is it
is a
too
hard
many?
one. Yeah, because it's funny because I don't want to sound cliche, but it was so interesting is that I realized it was never a mistake because it was always a lesson learned, right? So whatever the mistake was always led to me getting even sharper with something, right? It's something as simple as, you know, it's something as simple as, putting my campaign filing documents and forgetting to, to submit at a particular time. And now I'm all of a sudden aware that I should do this at a certain time. It's something as simple as,
Lesson learned.
having lesson learned. It's something as simple as having a certain trust in people's words about things that they will say that they're going to do, and understand that you have to trust your gut and find some sort of encouragement in people's actions based on what they say to you. If you're led by that, you're not going to get anywhere, right? So I think in general, every mistake is an opportunity to learn. I can't think of a specific
Okay.
one, but I
No,
would say
no
that I
worries.
learned from every. Yeah,
Now, I understand.
give
Now,
me
what
another one.
keeps
Give me another one.
Felix Omozusi up at night?
To be honest with you, the latest two things that kept me up at night was when I was teaching. I still do after school for theater, and these kids couldn't read my script.
Okay.
I couldn't sleep for like 2 nights. I was up at night
What did you
because I'm
do
talking
about
about
it?
third, fourth, fifth
What
grade.
did you do about
I'm
it?
going to. I'm going to. What did I do?
Yeah, what did you do
I
about
got them
it?
to read. Let me tell you what I did. I got them to read better through theater, and they
Okay.
said that. I
Fluency, yes.
we had consistently reading the script. They got better at reading. So as your
Hmm.
assembly member, I'm going to invest in more of those programs. Another thing that
Okay.
kept me up at night was when I went to Throgs Neck Housing, and they showed me
Okay.
the leaking ceiling and the no hot water and the no heat, and they talked about the privatization that was about to come there, and that kept me up at night. And
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 what will
that
you
I'm
do
still
about
thinking.
that as an assemblyman?
First, we have to have regulations that, these every decision that's being made has to be made by the community. Number one. Number two, we have to give them consistent funding. I think it's time for us to update the whole infrastructure from the pipes. I mean, I'm getting a walkthrough tomorrow actually to go look at the specifics because I took my notes. We need to get a lot of funding to make it up to par, to have the quality of life match their neighbors across the street, right? So those are the last two things that kept me up at night in the
Okay.
recent times. And it kind of lights a fire in me to get to work. And I'm ready to actually be able to deliver and show that, there's no problem too big or too small that we cannot handle.
So, what promise are you making today to your voters? What promise can you make today to your voters?
82nd Assembly District, I, Felix Omozusi, promise to be a real leader, a leader who means what they say, a leader who's going to care for you, who's going to educate, who's going to build, who's going to protect, and who's going to empower you through intentional legislations and community partnerships. I cannot do this alone. I want to hear directly from you. I want to hear your concerns, your thoughts. I want to hear the issues. I want to be your voice in Albany. I want to be your advocate. I want to lead this community better than it was before I got here. And I pledge that if you vote for me on June 23rd, and early voting this Saturday to the 21st, I'm going to do some things in this community that have not been done before. I will create an impact here to mobilize the youth, to get them empowered, to protect our seniors, to keep our streets safe, and to reimagine our education system and make the changes that are needed. So please vote for me on June 23rd. Again, my name is Felix
Okay, it's not over yet. These are rapid fire questions
I
now for
know.
you, Felix.
I'm just
Rapid
giving
fire
you my little
questions.
pitch.
3 words that describe your leadership style. 3 words that describe your leadership style. This is pencils and perspectives.
um, implementer. Because
Okay.
they call me, I get it done. Um, Mr. Civics, because it's about the people, civic engagement, um, and service. I'm
Okay.
here to serve. I've spent my whole adult life serving
Okay.
the
Coffee or
community,
tea?
and that's a tough. It's funny because I'm drinking tea right now because I had coffee earlier. So I would say coffee because tea is. I don't think tea has that much caffeine in it. So this is why I drank this later because it'd be too late. So I'll say coffee.
Early bird or night owl?
I'm definitely a night owl. I don't. At 3 a.m. That's when I get energy and I'm ready to take over the world and do some amazing things. In the morning, I need my coffee to get back up.
What's your
More,
favorite New
please. More,
York
please.
landmark?
Huh. The Yankee Stadium. because it represents, to me, it represents New York. Like, in Nigeria, they have, I'm a first generation American Nigerian background. When they say America, they say Yankee. The
Mhm.
slang is Yankee. So
Yes.
Yankee represents New York, represents America.
Okay. Favorite book.
The Bible,
Okay,
for
what's the
sure.
last book you've read?
Isaiah 60, verse 22.
Okay.
And in the right time, I'll make it happen quickly. Thus says the
Okay.
Lord.
One word that describes the Bronx. And you better get this one right. You better come
Hip
correct
hop,
with this one.
hip hop,
Hello. Okay, okay,
hip
okay.
hop.
How do the kids do it?
I think is it
Okay.
like this?
Yes. Now, what is one thing voters would be surprised to learn about you?
I'm an actor. I've been in a couple of
Yes,
movies.
yes.
I'm also a singer. You might have seen me on TV. A couple of, I don't know, and a
You
couple of
ready
things.
for
I'm
your
also a
close-up,
singer.
Mr. Demir?
I am. I am. Let's go.
Yes. Nice, nice. Now, if elected, what do you hope your legacy will be?
I hope that people will say that this was a true leader. This was a true leader chosen by God to make an impact and build his kingdom. And what is that? That's peace, that's prosperity, that's unity. I hope that, I would leave the community better than it was when it got there. I hope to build some impactful infrastructures, whether it's the youth center they're talking about for a long time, whether it's another community center, whether it's a hospital, something that would live on and be a source of hope for the community. I hope to have a positive impact on the education system. I'm an educator. I really want to see our students love reading and love the arts of being smart and being creative and know that they could be anybody they want to do, that they're not limited to their environment or their situations. And I hope that the community will be proud of me and say that, you know what, he came in and he made a difference. Thank you.
Now, private, public, charter, Catholic school. Which do you
Oh,
prefer? Or homeschool? I must add homeschool.
okay, that's okay. Okay, so I'm gonna answer this in a very interesting way.
Okay.
Public, because we're public servants and we want to make it better. But hopefully that the public school gets a little doses of what the charter schools are doing and kind of looks at what are you doing, that what works over here, and let's get some of that over here. I don't know much about homeschool yet, but I'm gonna see.
Okay.
Not that I'm not for it. I'm just saying I don't.
Of
I
course,
think
of
a
course.
good
Yeah.
educator like yourself will be good at it. But yes, I would say public school with a little sprinkle of charter school benefits on the public, and that's what I intend to do as your assemblyman.
Okay. Now, if voters remember only one thing from this interview, what do you want that to be?
Hmm. I wanted to remember that Felix Omozusi, and I say that because people struggle to pronounce.
Yeah.
I wanted to know that Felix Omozusi has over a decade of experience. I'm not just talking. I didn't just wake up one day to run. I have done the work. I've made the investment. I've spent my whole adult life in service for the community, from education to the assembly to the Senate to humanitarian organizations. And I've gone to these different institutions and I've assessed the issues. I've spoken to the people on the ground and I've been able to work with them to get it done, but there was still a limitation to the kind of impact I could make. And that's why I'm running to be your assembly member. I want to directly impact my community with policies that better serve them. I want them to know that they have a leader who is emerging, who is going to be one of those leaders who will create a significant impact, a leader who's going to be bold enough to address the problems directly and not make any excuses. I wanted to know that this is a leader who's going to believe that there's no problem too big or too small that we cannot handle if we work together. Also, I wanted to know that this leader is not just going to talk about what he wants to do. He's bringing them in as stakeholders. I want to hear your ideas. I want to hear your thoughts and turn that into legislation and make that a bill for the whole, or a law for the whole state of New York. That is the power that you have. But you have to talk to leaders who want to empower you, who want to hear from you, who wants to make sure that every decision goes by you, for you, unlike our assembly member right now, who is doing his own thing and speaking for the corporations and not the people. I am for the people first. I do not get any funding from any PACs. I'm not endorsed by any particular organization. I'm endorsed by God and the people. So I'm looking forward to becoming your assembly member. So please vote for me on June 23rd. Early voting starts on Saturday. My name is Felix Omozusi.
It was a pleasure
Yes,
having you on A
absolutely.
Teacher Unplugged. And you have any final thoughts? I mean, you've
I just
wrapped
want
it
to
up
say
and you've
thank
said
you.
it all.
I've said it all. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for being an educator. The last thing I should have said with the education system is that the teachers need a raise. That is a
Yes, thank
non-negotiable.
you.
Teachers are the unspoken heroes. Being in a classroom all day is literally in a war zone, and they're training our next generation. They're literally nurturing the next set of leaders. So I think they need a lot of support and encouragement. So thank you, and I want to shout you out just for your leadership, and thank you for
Thank
giving me
you.
an opportunity to share my story.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you again. And we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
Teacher Unplug. That's another episode of A Teacher Unplug. Our regular scheduled episode will happen in June because we have to say goodbye to, seniors that are graduating, that are moving on into college. And we have a lot of college updates for a lot of seniors. So thank you for tuning in. And as always, I love my audience. Till next time, bye-bye.